let's get this party started. Notice is hereby given of a regular meeting of the City of San Angelo Development Corporation to be held on May 24th, 2023 at 8:30 a.m. at the East Mezzanine of City Hall, 72 West College Avenue, San Angelo, Texas. For the purpose of considering the following agenda items. Number one, we'll call the meeting to order. It is 8:30. Number two, prayer. Director Mahaffey, can you please lead us in prayer?
Good morning, all. Thank you, Lord, for another wonderful day here in the wonderful city of San Angelo, Texas. We ask that you guide our actions today and pray for those in need. Amen.
Thank you, Director Ceballos. Three, public comment. Issues or items that are not on the agenda may be raised by the public at this time. Citizens should speak from the podium, begin by stating their name, and limit remarks to less than 3 minutes. Board members may request that a discussed item be placed on a future agenda. The board takes public comment on all regular agenda items during the discussion of those items. Do we have any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 4, the consent agenda. A, consider approving the necessary corporation disbursements. B, consider approving the regular meeting minutes of April 26, 2023. And C, consider approving the April 2022 financials. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Just one point of order. We are approving the April 2023 financials, are we not?
No.
Okay.
So, we'll motion with that correction noted. Good eye. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 5, regular agenda. Consider appointing a president, first and second vice president for the City of San Angelo Development Corporation. Presentation by Michael Dane.
Mr. Chairman, Michael Dane, Interim Director. There's no presentation that goes with this. This is just the time of year, the meeting where we elect officers, board officers.
Okay.
And Mr. Mantooth joined us, which took him kind of lowered his risk, but other absent board members are still at risk for being elected to positions.
So anyone not present is a victim or can be president? Well, and we did have a vacancy at the first vice president, and per our bylaws every May, we are supposed to appoint unless otherwise stated. Yeah, we should be appointing a new kind of executive board. So, any discussion? Any thoughts?
What's the protocol? Do we start with president and work our way down?
Yes, you may.
Okay, then I nominate Max Puelo to be president for another term.
Second.
That was quite kind of quick. Okay.
There was not a lot of time spent making the case for, and so we've allocated no time to make the case against that candidate. So.
Well, I guess I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do anyway, so I wouldn't mind staying on board for another year.
Well done.
Brandon, do we need to vote on that?
Is that a motion? Is your
I
motion?
made the motion.
Okay.
It was seconded by multiple individuals.
All right, yeah, I was caught in the tailspin on that one. Hold on a second. So, first by Director Jones, second by Director Spano. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries.
I move we elevate Dr. Clifton Jones to first vice president.
Second. Natural progression.
Okay, so got a first by Director Mantooth, second by Director Spano. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. So now second vice president.
Director Manfred.
Second.
Vice President.
Second.
I'm here, I'm in the room.
We have a first by Director Ceballos, second by Director Spanos. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, congratulations. We've got our president first and second vice president for the year. All right. Thank you for stepping up and your leadership. Let's move on to letter B. Discuss topics for the June workshop meeting. Presentation by Michael Dane.
We've put some ideas together. Nothing's set in stone, but we wanted to go through it with you in case you had ideas or preferences for what we talked about at our June meeting. We're planning June being our strategic planning meeting. We are anticipating posting a regular business agenda in case we have business to take care of, and then adjourning out of that agenda into a work session. Remember that the difference is they're both public meetings, but the work session, there are no votes or decisions made at that meeting. It's very much just to discuss topics. Some of the ideas we put together, some sort of a board member orientation, fundamentals about the corporation, fundamentals and history. We've started a conversation with Brandon about what he feels would be an appropriate kind of a curriculum to kind of get that started. A little more in-depth or a discussion of the corporate financials and the financial position of the corporation. Oh, she's got it up on screen. Where we talked, the key there is to talk about the resources we believe are available for projects and a listing of possible projects and the balance between the two, because Bob's list of possible projects far exceeds our current financial position. We want you to be aware of that, because a lot of what we do going forward, if everything comes to fruition, we will be prioritizing. And we'll be talking about strategies for making our cash last longer and still develop what we hope to be attractive packages for companies.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, on continuing that, if we could dig maybe a little bit further when we get to that point of the discussion, as far as, the ballot side of the projects, I think I'd like to see a little bit more in-depth explanation for the board of projects that we have underway and how that money's being allocated.
That's a great idea. Future projects and budgetary considerations. We'll ask the chamber to present their strategic plan for attracting, recruiting, discuss some possible policy updates. We think it is time, for example, disbursements and purchasing authority. We'd like to align those with the bylaws, but we'll talk about those and prioritize those so that we can begin moving through those. And we're going to have a field trip today where we visit the airport, get acquainted with the secure side of the airport, but also see some of the results of prior COSA-DC projects. We're kind of excited about that. I think that's a good idea that Max said we need to get out and see the results of ours and other boards' work. And so we'll discuss possible destinations for that kind of thing. But none of that's set in stone. And if you have ideas or preferences, we'd very much like to hear them.
I'll piggyback, since you brought up bylaws, and I'll kind of defer this to Brandon, but, we did kind of look at bylaws. I guess it was kind of the end of last year, and I think we have an opportunity to maybe revisit that and maybe kind of take a look or even have a game plan for all of the contracts that we have. And just, I think it's a good opportunity to take a look at all of the contracts that we have and see if there's any opportunities for any revisions or improvements on those.
You're talking about from an administrative standpoint, right? Not the incentive contracts.
Right, no, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, the city council is having their meeting soon, or they just had it, to talk about their priorities and so forth.
That's a great point. The city council's having their strategic planning meeting this Friday.
Okay.
And one of the suggestions Max had was, let's don't even try to do any strategic planning until we hear what their priorities are. And that'll give us a better opportunity to align with with what they're going to do. I would anticipate that economic development will still be one of their priorities. And it has been planes, trains, and automobiles, and I would anticipate it still will be that. But we'll have to see what we come out of that meeting with.
Yeah. Okay. Any other feedback from the board, ideas?
And you don't have to make your decisions today. If you have ideas, call us and let us know. If you've seen things that worked well on other boards, let us know.
So what's the date for this workshop?
The next meeting, June, right?
June,
So it's on the same day as our regular.
June
I
28th.
believe it's the 28th.
So it'll be after that meeting.
But like all our other meetings, if we need to alter that date, that's an option. That's really all we have on that.
Okay.
Just to give you the heads up and open the door for your suggestions.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. All right. Moving on to C, presentation of 2022 City of San Angelo Development Corporation Annual Report. Presentation by Michael Dane.
Thank you, Michael Dane, Interim Economic Development Director. We'll go through the 2022 annual report. This will largely follow the format in the printed report. Planes, Skyline Aviation. We worked through 2022 to assist with the development of the scope and the footprint. And as you're aware that after 2022, in this year, in this calendar year, we did sign an agreement. That's a public-private partnership to restore the existing facility and expand on that and create a very much updated FBO experience for our flyers. They also will be reconfiguring and updating parking areas out there, which will improve the parking for that facility, but will also improve the parking for the rest of the airport. Next slide. Trains, Railport obviously is up and running, and they have begun receiving shipments. And the important part of this is that it is attracting attention. We've heard Michael Looney talk about the attractiveness of the Railport, and so we believe it's already paying dividends. Whether or not we can take anything to the grocery store and buy any beans with it yet is a question, but certainly it's attracting the kind of attention that we hoped it would. Possible expansion to the east, depending on needs. The city owns a parcel immediately to the east, which would facilitate an expansion. We would anticipate council would look favorably upon some sort of an expansion onto their land if it became necessary. What we've taken on as a current, it's not really it was identified in 2022, but the action has started in this year for the extension of utilities to the Railport. And the idea being that the city and COSA-DC and the owners of the Railport have in common objectives to extend utilities. Ours would be that facility have the utilities, and the city's interests are in the general availability of utilities in that part of town, not just our parcel. And so we've started a conversation about how to make that happen. It's a very large project. I think the number 15 million was kicked around.
It's probably close to 10 million, 9 to 10 million just for what we need for the Railport, and that doesn't include overall system upgrades, which brings it closer to 15 million. Overall system upgrades being additional storage for that part of town, additional pump capacity for that part of town. You can't just keep hooking onto a water system and expect the water to flow at some point. the system itself has to be upgraded, not just extended. So those are some of the things we're looking at.
That is one of those conversations where council was very supportive and said, we need to move ahead, absolutely start planning now. Yes, sir.
So when you say utilities, tell me what that includes. Sewer, water, electricity, gas, fiber, what does it include?
Water and wastewater.
That's all.
Yes, sir.
Water and sewer in those prices, just those. It's going to require a substantial lift station out there because the ground is so flat. So it'll be a sewage lift station. Literally a couple of miles of pipe runs. So it's a big project when we get into it.
So it already has electricity.
Electricity is there, three-phase electricity is there, and there's high-pressure gas at the south end of the existing rail park.
What about broadband internet? Do they have that out there?
I don't believe they have it yet, but I would suspect that would be probably run overhead. I don't know, we're also looking at fiber optics and alternatives for the industrial park itself. So that discussion will lead into a discussion here as well.
Who's providing the electrical service at the railport?
At the railport, that's AEP.
Thank you.
Automobiles, we participated in both the I-27 and the I-14 corridor associations that are advocates for the completion of these routes. The mayor represents us in both groups, and I believe she is the president or chair of the I-27 group. And I think she and Michael are going to Austin tonight to work on it. So continue to participate in that. I think a notable event on the I-27 portion was that they received a federal corridor designation and some funding to go with that. Business and retention, we continued working with existing BREP clients and issued approximately $760,000 in BREP incentives during the year. BREP continues to be a priority. We heard a presentation about gardening from the chamber folks, and we've started a discussion about a marketing campaign to support that locally. But that also needs to align, that's activity in this year, and that also needs to align with what comes out of our strategic planning meeting. So if we continue to see BREP as a priority, then I would anticipate that we would be advocates for some sort of a campaign to support the activity of the chamber in recruiting for that program. Industrial Park Phase 1. No property sales on Phase 1 in 2022, approximately 24.6 acres available. Bob gave me a brief, or not so brief, financial summary. That project is, if you look at the life cycle of that project, it is approximately $1.78 million ahead of costs. In other words, we're $1.8 million of revenues in excess of expenditures for that project, which includes some grant revenue. And with the 24.6 acres that are available, Bob has estimated that value at $616,000. So there's still assets there that are marketable. And I think, Bob, that looks like a $25,000 per acre estimate.
That's correct. $25,000 an acre for 5 acres and above, $29,000 for less than 5 acres.
And those are favorable, as I recall, those are favorable values, that it's difficult to find that kind of value.
You just don't find it at that value.
So that's probably a conservative value of the Phase 1 land that's available. But again, our intention is to create jobs and tax base. Phase 2, brush clearing completed. In 2022, the negotiations began on the sale, the first sale after the initial AEP group moved in. That is ongoing but nearing completion.
Right, yeah, they're going through their due diligence now.
That's anticipated to be about $400,000. Taking the same approach for Phase 2 from a financial perspective, we have roughly $2.9 million in expenditures that exceed revenues. That, with this land sale, that would come down to $2.5 million. And there's considerably more acreage left, approximately 109 acres left, similarly valued.
We actually are applying the direct costs to these land sales. So the price on Phase 2 is $45,000 an acre. We haven't made a distinction yet between smaller and larger tracts, but it just to recoup our expenditures and cover a few anticipated costs, we're looking at $45,000 an acre, which is still way below what everybody else is selling for land that has utilities available, streets and roads, or streets and drainage available. The developers do not have to provide their own on-site retention in Phase 2 because we've provided regional detention. So it's literally a shovel-ready project.
On that basis, Bob has valued the remaining land at $4.9 million, which I think is probably conservative, especially with that stormwater feature. So overall, we're in the neighborhood of $700,000 short of covering the cost between the two phases, and after this sale goes through. So with over $5 million worth of assets available for stimulating economic activity. Yes, sir.
Forgive me for interrupting. Catch me up here. I keep hearing things like well below market value and way less than anybody else is charging. Why are we not at market value in the pricing of this?
That's a good question. I think our intent has been to stimulate the economic activity and be below market value. How far below has been a topic in the past.
And we've also sort of tried to keep in mind that we are a nonprofit organization. So if we start making huge profits on our land sales, that may bring that into question. So we try to cover our expenses and also fund the next phase as we go on.
So did I hear that we're upside down $700,000? Did I hear you say that?
And have in excess of $5 million in valued, in the way we said, in excess of $5 million in assets available. Would be appropriate at some future meeting just to have a review of those values that we see on other parcels and just to get some perspective on where our numbers are compared to the market?
I think that would be helpful. We've had some turnaround in the board, so there's a lot of folks that don't have that history.
I agree. I think it's good. I was thinking of bringing it to a future conference. I don't know how many on the board have been out to the industrial park, but it's pretty cool.
All right, would you make a note that all right, ahead of me again. All right, business plan competition, 3 winners chosen. Plateau Brewing, $40,000. Reyes Diesel Service, $20,000. And Bearded Barista, $10,000. Another great year for the business plan competition. Going forward in this year, they've tried to streamline that a little bit so they can get the same result with less time invested. And we very much appreciate the SBDC's participation in that. Their role is critical to making that happen.
So a quick question on that. Is there any consideration of raising the amount, the total amount for being able to award? Just, I don't remember the budget, and I mean, that was prior to my arrival, so I'm just curious if there was any.
That is up to the board.
Okay,
Yeah.
We can
We can vote
discuss
on
that
that.
also at some point.
okay.
Why don't we,
I'd like to visit that at some point if we could.
let's talk about that at
Maybe
next
strategic
month's
planning.
meeting?
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
sounds good.
Does that include the in-kind portion of the award?
That's cash from us.
Okay.
All right, incubator, currently two clients in the incubator, and we have 3 rooms available.
3 rooms, yes.
3 rooms available, so incubator's moving smoothly with some capacity available. This year, we did receive the Certificate of Achievement for Economic Excellence from the TEDC. That has to, points are awarded based on your procedures, how you operate the board, how the board gets its training, and how staff gets its training. And training was a big part of it, and just our routine, the way we routinely handle things. We scored enough points to get the award. We were tickled to get that, and I think it's a worthy objective. A big part of it is training and participating in TEDC or somebody else's training, but we think that's absolutely appropriate for staff to continue to be trained and for the board to receive that training. And so we think we need to make provision for training in the budget. All right, in addition to that, the chamber has put a few slides together to go over what their activity looked like last year.
Yes, yes, take control.
Good morning, Michael Looney, VP of Economic Development for the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce. Just wanted to run through a couple slides to recap some of our 2022 activities and accomplishments. Overview for those who are maybe watching and are unfamiliar with the mission of the Chamber of Commerce and how it works in concert with the City of San Angelo Development Corporation. We work as a partner to the City of San Angelo Development Corporation, who is a primary source of our funding. We also work for Tom Green County as a contracted agent with them to do economic development within the areas of the county. And then we also have many other partnerships through ASU, Howard College, SAISD, and other organizations like the Concho Valley Council of Governments that we work with collaboratively. Prospect generation, that's the number one focus, is finding companies that are within the United States or offshore that might be interested in having a presence in the Concho Valley. Industry recruitment follows along. The primary focus of the San Angelo Chamber's efforts is to recruit industry. Industry is that which creates primary jobs. Primary jobs act as a platform for the creation of all other economic wealth building within a region. So manufacturers are pretty much really one of the main focal points, along with technology companies. The SARMA, that's the San Angelo Regional Manufacturers Alliance. That is a program that we started in 2017, very successful. That acts as the manufacturing association for the Concho Valley. And it's opened a lot of doors with industrial operations and industrial enterprises throughout the region so that we can be in a better position to communicate with them, understand what their barriers to success may be, whether it's workforce, whether it's expansion, whether it's infrastructure, transportation, logistics, and work out those problems with them so that they can remain in San Angelo, grow their operations, and continue to create wealth. And then industrial career promotion and training. A couple of years ago, we did a survey of most of our SARMA members and asked them what are the real big barriers and the big issues that they have. And surprisingly, it was workforce training was a really big part of it. So they wanted to engage us, which they did, to find out what are those things that we might be able to do to help that. Obviously, workforce is a big issue within the United States. Lack thereof, And so uptraining existing employees and upskilling new employees to an operation is key. Without the employees, the company really can't grow as robustly as it may want to. That all led to 2022 economic impact. We calculated just over $28 million in economic yield from these 3 projects. Direct jobs created was 55. Indirect jobs, 26, and induced jobs, 22. We keep our calculations modest and non-exaggerative. We use usually a 3-year scale on understanding what the economic yields are when we recruit a company or whether we grow a company. Prospect generation. This is probably one of the most important slides of our presentation. It shows that we've had a remarkable increase in our active pipeline. These are leads that come in through really 3 main sources. One, general chamber inquiries as related to the Manufacturing Association. That's the SARMA. The state of Texas, which sends out RFIs, requests for information. Usually every couple of days we'll get 1 or 2. And then we contract with a company, rather inexpensive contract, but has a good yield, and that's a company called GSLI, which is a company that works with economic developers and attends trade shows and communicates with industrial sectors to try to generate leads that might be something we're interested in looking at for our region. And so most of the RFIs that we get have needs that are far in excess of what our community is able to deliver, whether it's 200 to 400, 500,000 square foot existing buildings, 500 to 1,000 employees needed year 1, different types of things that are really probably geared more towards major metropolitan areas. But we do have a niche in that we are able to service probably about 40% of the RFIs that come through, and we always attack those and make sure that we put our best foot forward and respond and follow up.
Michael, you mentioned that some of these prospects are far exceed what we're capable of answering. Could you give a couple of examples of incentives that were paid? Abilene.
Yes, that's an interesting question. It's a good question. A lot of the larger economic development projects done throughout the state received very, very generous incentives, grants from their income, from the cities that they landed in, and we were fairly surprised at some of the levels of these contributions. Now they're all performance based, of course, but they're still obligations. It was Great Lakes Cheese, which is a packaging company, a co-packer in Abilene, that was reported in the newspaper that they received a $33.3 million incentives package for that investment. And that, I think, didn't include the state of Texas ETF.
There were a couple other,
incentives
that they received outside of just
Texas veterans.
$33 million was just
33.3. That's the one that probably stands out the most, just because it's just a really stout investment on their part.
Do you remember the number of jobs that was associated with that?
I think it was around 450 to 500, I believe.
But
they're obviously doing shift work.
Right, but they were not huge paying jobs either, I don't believe.
I believe they were not executive level. Some, but you know, it's a co-packing facility, and we have similar type operations here in San Angelo, of course, too. But they generally don't have a real high pay rate, at least initially. But yeah, that's one of the things that we are pretty comfortable with and have a lot of pride in, is that a lot of the transactions that we work on, we do not hand out the menu to these companies and say, here are the incentives packages that are available to you if you want to move here. We want to explore, does the region support their operation? Logistics, transportation, supply chain, raw materials, skilled workforce, facilities, land, and just the geographic location of San Angelo as it relates to their customer base. Those are really the focal points. And so incentives, which are examined and then ultimately possibly granted by COSA DC, is not the first thing. So we're not an incentives-based type economic development mission, and that works really well. For example, CSA Materials was an expansion into the rail port. This was the rail port that this body deeply participated in the acquisition of. So CSA Materials was really the first major consumer tenant out at the rail port. Allen's Transport, this is a project that we had worked on for years, and took about 5 years, and we closed it in February of '22, and that is a heavy freight logistics and transportation company based out of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and they purchased a building on Gas Plant Road. Rosenberger Site Solutions, which you'll remember from recent presentations, that is a Friedolfen, Germany-based electronics manufacturer, and we closed that deal in October of '22. That was the only transaction of the three that required any kind of incentives, and the incentives for Rosenberger was $75,000, a fairly modest amount considering the economic yield delivered to the community. And that was really just a request that they had to help cover some of the costs for moving some of their very delicate equipment from Pennsylvania to San Angelo. And you can see the direct economic impacts are solid. These are companies that have a lot of durability. They have no plans on doing anything except expanding within the community. And during the negotiations with all three of these companies, they were very enthusiastic about San Angelo, felt very confident in the city's capabilities to deliver the workforce, and just really the culture that they were looking for. Then again, our manufacturing efforts, Fabricators Recruitment Day. This is related to business retention and expansion as it directly corresponds with workforce training. One of the most major projects that we've been involved with is creating a bridge between industry and academia. We find that to be very, very important in that academia has consulted with us, that's Howard College, it's ASU, that's SAISD. How can they further include in their conversations how to support industry and get those students interested in the different industrial, manufacturing, software development, IoT type technology jobs. And one of those is manufacturing days. My partner, Mike Berry, really was the tip of the spear on setting up the manufacturing day last October. This was the only manufacturing registered event with the Manufacturing Institute in West Texas. It combined training with Air Motor Windmill School, which was a very successful project. We did our second one this year. And this has been a positive step in bringing students, and not just necessarily students at the three educational institutions, but even if it's students that are coming from one industry and pivoting into perhaps a manufacturing industrial type job, bringing people from a second career pathway into manufacturing. SME Prime is one of our crowning achievements. This was, again, spearheaded by Mike Berry before he even joined the chamber when he was still director of training at Ethicon. This is a partnership program with the Society of Manufacturing Engineers designed to train, educate, inspire high school students to go into the manufacturing sector. We were partnered with COSA DC. Thank you very much for your investment. Ethicon, Principal LED, and the Chamber of Commerce to put together the seed money package for this ongoing sustainable project. And that is going to wrap up our initial presentation. I appreciate the opportunity to present. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
This presentation, it's phenomenal. The work that you and Mike Berry do is fantastic, very much appreciated. Love the analytics, love the data. A lot to digest, but I look forward to really hammering down on this and looking through it.
Thank you for that. And you raised a really good point, and that is data analytics. What we find is that that's That's by choice, but it's also by design. Most of the corporations that we work with within all of various spectrum of industries really, could you kill that alarm, please? Thank you, sorry. They want to know the analytics. They want to know the data. They want to see what Mike sees when he runs those data analytics, and that's really how they base a lot of their decisions. In fact, that was really how Rosenberger made their decision, because they wanted to see not just the fact that we have a very beautiful city with a very nice culture and a supportive attitude, but what is the real key and what are the real metrics of moving our corporation here. And they moved an entire facility from Pennsylvania. They shut down a Pennsylvania-based facility and moved the entire thing here, based on his research, really. And so thank you for noticing that. Thanks very much for letting me present today.
Is this the clicker? I got a couple of things to add. Look in the upper right corner, the active project pipeline. This kind of information talks about where leads become prospects, or prospects become moved through the pipeline. This kind of information they have in a system that they utilize at the chamber. And we tried to capture this capability in the scope update that we're going to be discussing here in a few minutes on the next agenda item. So I wanted to point that out. To me, that's very interesting to see how prospects move through that pipeline. And in addition, while it's not directly related to the activity with this board, I think it is notable that the Chamber, I think, recently received at least one award related to the Destination and Marketing Organization. Walt, do you mind just tell us what those awards were?
We won 4 awards from Travel Texas. It's one of the gold standards in terms of those kinds of awards.
Can we get you on the microphone?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. We won 4 awards from Travel Texas, which is one of the gold standards in terms of those awards. One was for a marketing campaign we did. Our bottlenecks are better than yours. I don't know if you've seen the clips, but it's clever and was well recognized. We got the Outdoor Music Fest of the Year with our Wild West Fest. Oh yeah, Revolution Film Festival was the new or under the radar event, which is a new festival that we brought on board. It'll be its 3rd year this year, and it brings independent filmmakers to our town to not only show their work, but also to experience us as a film-friendly city. And the 4th one was, which? Oh yeah. Best Outdoor Art with our Pop Art Museum, and obviously all the great work that Art in Unusual Places does. So those 4 awards are notable, but it's, I think, more notable in that we're categorized with the big cities. So we were taking on Dallas, Fort Worth, Galveston, a lot of other places that have great offerings as well. So I'm very pleased with those, and we expect to see more. So we're also in the top 10 True West cities. Obviously, we're still the visual arts capital of Texas, and we have some other great accolades that we can use to sell and promote our travel and tourism industry, and we're doing that. So appreciate the opportunity to bring you up to speed with those things.
All right, thank you, Walt.
I know that's not directly related to our activity, but they're a partner organization and their success is our success. So that concludes, I think. Make sure I'm pressing the right button. That concludes this agenda presentation item. We're available for questions,
All right, thank you. Any questions, feedback from the board?
comments, feedback, and that can extend through the month to topics that we would discuss next month.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect segue to kind of get our minds thinking about the workshop next month, and just all the activities that we're involved in, so. Okay. Thank you, Michael. We'll move on to item D. Consider authorizing the board president to negotiate and execute Amendment 1 to the 2023 Coastal DC Chamber of Commerce Professional Services Performance Agreement with ratification by the City Council. Presentation by Michael Dane.
All right. In February, This board voted to approve the proposed agreement and extend the current, also to approve the updated scope of services and extend the term beyond the current term by 3 + 1 + 1. That's 3 additional years plus 1 year extension plus an option for another year extension. We took that to the city council and they considered it. And the questions very much were not about the scope, but about the extension. And the council very narrowly voted that down. During the meeting and subsequent timeframe, I received advice during the meeting and then advice after the meeting. The advice after the meeting was to seek, when it goes back to COSA-DC, to seek a similar kind of a format for the extension. Instead of 3 + 1 + 1, to seek the COSA-DC board's approval on a 2 + 1. And so we would finish this year and then we would have a 2-year extension and then an option for a 1-year extension beyond that. That appeared to be an effort to compromise with council and compromise with the board's proposal. So I think it was very much an effort to achieve compromise that would be satisfactory to all groups. Walt and I had a very brief conversation about it. Go ahead if you want to tell them what you think.
Yeah. Really, in summary, I think that this model gives us the necessary runway and stability of contractual obligation to really focus on the mission and be less focused in terms of continual renewals. I'll note that this discussion has been going on for nearly a year now, and we welcome the efforts to close this deal as quickly as possible so that we can get our guys off the hot seat in terms of what their future looks like. So we endorse and support this new model, 2 + 1, and we encourage you all to approve that. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
So if the board were to approve this proposal to authorize the president to negotiate and execute this, would this amendment then have to come back to the board to be ratified before it could go to council? Or what's the timeline here? What are our options?
My understanding is this item is on the agenda, and if you vote to approve it, it goes to council.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we're not really authorizing the board president to negotiate and execute it. We're simply being asked to approve the agreement that you've described to us this morning, correct?
So we have that negotiate and execute language in there to give the board president some leeway. And we do this with city contracts all the time. If there's any small issues that come up after the board approves it, then he could have the discretion to make minor changes like that. If y'all are specifically approving a 2-year term with one option to extend, I mean, he wouldn't have any authority over and above that to negotiate and execute.
And the Amendment 1 includes Exhibit A, which is a tweak to the scope of services. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so from the last meeting, I think we added some language about the reporting. The written reports would be at least monthly, was the language we added, and then a separate reporting requirement would have oral and written reports at least quarterly. And then we also added language about reported expenditures shall include disclosures of any consultants used under that agreement. And I think the board was all in favor of those changes.
One of the reporting items, topics that has come up in reviewing our agenda, we have a regular meeting where before we have this meeting, days before, we meet with the board chair and go through the agenda. And one of the things Max observed was that we have more projects in the pipeline than we routinely think about. And one of the modifications, I mentioned it before, was the ability to know through their tracking system just how many prospects are in the pipeline. We hear about onesies and twosies, but what we saw in that bubble a while ago was above 10. And I think it was closer to 20 prospects at some point in that pipeline. And so knowing that there's that much activity going on, I think is a benefit to this board and to the council. So that was one of the things we were trying to capture in an updated scope and not reinvent the wheel, utilize something they're already utilizing, doing it in an efficient way, so.
Well, I'll just point out, and I just want to say that to Walt's point, this has been ongoing for several months. I remember we approved this current, contract at the 11th hour, kind of in December, to push it through with the understanding that we would revise the scope within a 3-month period, and here we are in May, so almost 6 months in the process. So I appreciate that, although it's been kind of a roller coaster, experience, that we're at kind of a precipice of getting this done. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited that Walt's in favor of it, and Michael, you are as well, and that we've got some good insight and feedback from the city council. I think that gives us a good kind of feel for what they want, and I think that gives us good direction on how to proceed. I do have a couple of questions and that I have for Brandon as far as from a legal counsel perspective. And since we've talked about, the kind of like the bylaws where you mentioned about the workshop of making some changes, I personally would recommend, if that's okay with the board, to move this discussion into executive so that we could ask those questions and just kind of flush out a few little details and maybe come back with that with a decision.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that just as long as it's limited to consultation with attorney, and I'll need to get you some, the language you'll have to read that cites the section for that. So,
okay.
Just once.
Yeah, cool. That's.
Brandon, would you like us to wait, or would you like us to go to the next agenda item and come back to this one?
And do all of executive all at once?
Yeah, that'll be fine.
So we're going to just come back to this conversation.
Well, yeah, we'll skip it for right now, go to the executive search and then come back.
I'll
So
still be
that's
faster.
the last topic.
I'll still be faster than he is. All right. Do we need to say anything as we move away from this item so that we can come back to it? Okay. All right, we'll come back to item D in a few minutes as we approach executive session.
Okay, so we'll move on to item E, update regarding the Economic Development Director position and search process, presentation by Michael Dane.
All right, I had an update from the recruiter yesterday. He has 2 more candidates for us to consider, and he is preparing those, he worked up a binder for us that had their information on it. He prepared a questionnaire and had them complete that. So he goes through some prep to get them ready for, or their package ready for an interview, and that's where he is on these 2 candidates. And so I would anticipate that within a week or 2, he'll be, and he's also talking to them about time frame. So I would think within a week or 2, he's going to be trying to nail us down on the calendar for that. Yes, sir.
So I'm assuming the search firm qualifies these candidates before we go to the trouble of bringing them in so that they're fully aware of the range of the compensation package.
Yes, sir. They have that discussion. I'm not sure about the details of that discussion.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments from the board? No? All right, thank you, Michael.
All right.
All right, Brandon, did you have a chance to find that language?
Max, before we move into executive session, I feel urged to make a comment. One of the ongoing themes of our discussion around the contract with the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce has been that Mr. Koenig's employees felt threatened and their jobs were at risk, and he felt that we were disrespecting him as a city and disrespecting his people by this ongoing conversation. And I just want to affirm that I don't believe our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce has ever been in danger. And I don't believe it ever will be in danger, because I believe we need each other and we live in a symbiotic relationship that must go on for us to be successful. So I want to once again affirm, I think is a good word, to the Chamber of Commerce, that we appreciate, respect, and admire the work that they do, and very much want to be able to continue that relationship, and that this scope and this term has nothing to do with their work or our appreciation of it. Thank you.
And Rick, Rick, to that point, I think it was a unanimous vote before I got on this board to approve that contract. So I think that shows the support of this board before it even got to council. So just to your point.
Yeah. And I would affirm those remarks as well. Okay. Well, let me move on to C6, closed session. Executive session under the provision of Government Code Title V, Open Government Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D. Exceptions to the requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.087, Business Prospect Negotiations regarding 1, Technology Tower LLC, 2, ASU Pilot Training Facility at Mathis Field, 3, Project Monet, and I guess we'll make it a 4, or maybe item B, I guess, would be Section 551.071, consultation with attorney regarding the performance agreement contract. Okay. With that, it is 9:27, and we are in closed session. Thank you, everyone. And we are out of closed session. Follow-up and administrative issues. 7, A, consideration and possible actions of items discussed in closed session if needed.
Could we reopen what agenda item is that?
5D.
On item 5D, having to do with the chamber agreement. We have before you, the item is as you previously approved it, with the exception that instead of an extension in addition to the current term of 3 years plus an option for 1 plus another option for 1, what is proposed before you today or presented before you today is an extension of 2 years plus an option for 1 more year. Otherwise, the item is the same as you previously approved. Mm-hmm. This comes as a recommendation recommended for your consideration from council's review.
Mm-hmm. Do we have
motion to approve as presented?
So we have a first by Director Mahaffey, second by Director Ceballos. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item will move from here to a future council agenda, and we'll go from there.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. And do we have any other action items? We're waiting on some language from Brandon.
Yeah, we'll probably do Bob's presentation though. Sorry. Yeah, I'll be down by the time you get your.
Okay. Bob Schneeman, Economic Development Project Manager. This is a project for consideration of incentive to Technology Tower LLC. They are planning to purchase the old Sitel building out on the Loop. Purchase price is going to be in the neighborhood probably of $1.7 million. They plan on investing another $3.9 million in the project in capital investment. They will be retaining a total of 59 jobs that pay an average of $50,000, $51,000 per year. They intend to create, over the course of the next few years at least, an additional 20 full-time equivalent job positions. They have asked for both a capital investment incentive and also a job creation incentive. And also, we are considering, as a separate item, a tax abatement from the city. So we'll address the Costa DC incentives first, and then we'll talk about the other. So staff is proposing a $250,000 incentive, and that would be payable. We'll be working on a negotiation with them, but the intent, staff's intent is $100,000 when they close on the building, an additional $100,000 when they complete their capital improvements of $3.9 million. We would negotiate with them on the payment of that second $100,000. It might be a quarterly payment as they turn in receipts to us proving that they have made those investments. We'll negotiate that in the details. And then $50,000 of that would be for job creation incentive over probably a 5-year period. We're also asking the board to recommend to council as a separate, well, it will be outside this resolution, or would it be, Brandon, can we put it in the resolution?
It sounds like the resolution, yes, but it's
Okay.
part of the action item.
Yeah. At any rate, we would look at recommending to City Council that they consider a tax abatement over I would suggest 4-year period. That'll be up to council, and that's outside the purview of this board because it is an abatement rather than a rebate. So I'd open it to questions.
Questions from the board?
Bob, can you clarify that tax abatement?
Sorry?
Exactly, clarify the tax abatement portion of that, exactly what portion of their taxes were
Okay,
requested?
yes, a tax abatement, as we are proposing to City Council, would be an abatement of only the city portion of their property taxes. In the increased value in their property taxes, right? Which they estimate to be probably the 3.9 million, maybe another 500,000 in actual valuation of the building.
So they will continue paying taxes on the existing
They would still be paying taxes.
building as it stands?
Yes. Which I believe is appraised, 2022 appraisal about 1.1 or 1.2 million.
So they're still going to be paying taxes,
Correct.
just not the improved portion for
That's correct.
potential 4 years? Thank you.
And just to add some clarification to that, so if currently, as the building sits empty, nothing happens, but with improvements, there's potential for more revenue?
Yes, that's correct. For example, if there were business personal property located in the building now, when the building is vacant, they do not pay taxes on that business personal property. They do on the real estate, on the building, but not on equipment, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
If we have a motion, I have one prepared. If whoever wants to make it, hopefully you can read my slide.
I'll be happy.
Yeah, take it.
Yeah.
You can't read that chicken scratch.
I know.
He was going to be a doctor.
I propose a resolution authorizing the board president to negotiate and execute an economic development agreement with Technology Tower LLC in an amount not to exceed $250,000, a project authorized under Chapters 501 and 505 of the Texas Development Corporation Act, necessary to promote economic development and expand business enterprises that create or retain primary jobs, and recommending approval by City Council, and a recommendation that City Council consider and authorize tax abatements related to the project.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a first by Director Mantuf, a second by Director Jones. Any discussion or any public comment? Any public comment? No? Okay, any discussion from the board? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right, do we have any other action items? If not, we'll move on to B, announcements and consideration of future agenda items. Do you have any? If not, we'll entertain a motion for adjournment. All right. Have a first by Director Jones, second by Director Ceballos. All those in favor, say aye. 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 All right. It is 10:57. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.